Unprecedented activity on the sun and increasingly frequent natural disasters on Earth have led some scientists to predict an ominous climax in or about the year 2012. Author Lawrence Joseph has single-mindedly forged an understanding of the scientific data and the perils we may be facing.
Solar storms will climax in 2012, and the global satellite system is therefore at risk. Let's examine what the global satellite system means to us. Telecommunications, funds transfers, and military, climate, everything bounces off a satellite. The fact of the matter is that a lot of these satellites are not quote-unquote hardened sufficiently against increased solar output. Moreover, I found out that a lot of our military communications have been, for reasons of budget and I'm not sure why else, have been fobbed off onto commercial satellites which are not hardened. So a lot of the basic military security that we rely on in the satellite system is open to solar attack. Now what does that mean, solar attack? It's not that the sun doesn't like us and is after us. There's no paranoia in this. It's simply that when the sun has storms, it shoots out billion-ton blasts of protons and other radiation. Most of it goes off in other directions, but a certain percentage of it will hit the Earth, just the law of averages. Recently, we have found strange occurrences. Usually it takes about 2 to 3 days for coronal mass ejection, a CME, which is the term for this blast, to travel from the sun to the Earth. But in January 2005, there was one that made it in 30 minutes. Unless Einstein was seriously mistaken, if that thing cut another 22 minutes off of its travel time, it went down to 8 minutes, would be the speed of light, we would be completely obliterated.
When you have ancient prophecies, such as the Mayan prophecy about 2012, and cutting-edge science saying that solar storms can literally disrupt and destroy modern technological civilization, and that the next peak in those solar storms is 2012, well, that's when I pay attention.
But some theories about the dangers of the sun go further than a mangled power grid, much further.
When the solar particles reach the Earth, you will have a complete turnover of the magnetic field of the Earth. They will push the inner core of the Earth upside down. And when that happens, the Earth starts turning the other way around.
Patrick Jarrell is the author of How to Survive 2012. Jarrell believes Earth's magnetic poles will flip in 2012, triggering a cataclysmic chain reaction.
In short, huge earthquakes will level all buildings. Then all the volcanoes from the Earth will go off, and after that, a tidal wave of more than 2 kilometers will completely wipe out most of 95% from people on the Earth. We will be destroyed to nothingness.
Jarrell's theory centers on a massive solar flare that strips away Earth's protective magnetic shield and causes the planet to rotate in the opposite direction. It's an extreme point of view.
The sun clashing with the Earth's weakening magnetic field could have disastrous consequences. But what if they were just the first steps in a chain reaction of catastrophes, touched off by a solar rampage in 2012? According to one controversial new theory, a burst of electromagnetic radiation from the sun might have the power to trigger huge earthquakes.
What happens is the electromagnetism is conducted by metal in the crust, and sucking in the energy destabilizes the crust.
If it's true, a solar attack around 2012 could jumpstart quakes worldwide wherever fault lines contain a lot of metal.
This brand new flux of magnetic radiation might actually just be enough to nudge the balance of forces holding those plates in place. And suddenly you might then get a magnetically induced earthquake.
We've seen the carnage earthquakes can cause time and time again, so you may want to get all of your sightseeing in now. If large enough fault lines start shifting, our biggest cities could quickly be reduced to heaps of twisted metal.
The ground underneath them might suddenly seem to liquefy, and entire buildings would zigzag across the street and then collapse. The people who were living in there would suddenly find themselves surrounded by falling brick and mortar, the ground constantly shifting beneath their feet.
But even if you somehow escape the carnage of quakes, the Earth still won't be through dishing out the punishment. Massive earthquakes could just be the trigger for the next wave of the apocalypse.
Earthquakes aren't a danger only when they happen right underneath your feet. Some of the most devastating seismic events have been ones that happen deep out at sea under the ocean floor.
In northern Sumatra, 2004, one of the largest earthquakes ever measured struck off the coast. More than 227,000 people died. But it wasn't the earthquake itself that killed so many. It was the massive tsunami triggered by this underwater quake.
Tsunamis are among the most destructive forces known to man. The sudden shift in the ocean sea floor may be such that the ocean floor rises, maybe just a little bit, maybe just an inch or two. But in the process, it's displacing an enormous amount of water.
It's not until the colossal mass of water approaches shore, where the ocean becomes shallower, that the wave suddenly rises up.
And it starts to pull water away from the coastline and form itself into a gigantic, devastatingly strong wave.
As unlikely as this theory seems, it is backed by science. Albert Einstein first suggested it in 1955. And a new study from Princeton University reveals that the poles have shifted before. The North Pole rested in the middle of the Pacific 800 million years ago, placing Alaska at the equator. Even if this pole shift took place slowly over years, it would result in global climate change and shifting sea levels. If it took place rapidly, it would mean planet-wide disaster and mass extinction of species.
My name is Adam Malouf, and I'm a geoscientist at Princeton University. One of the things that I study in detail is how the continents move around on the surface of the Earth. Paleogeography is really important for understanding things like evolution of life. People have written to me, I've gotten quite a number of emails from people asking me if the world is going to end by pole shifting in 2012, this Mayan prophecy idea of the end of the world.
A geological phenomenon known as pole shift has been seized upon by those who believe the Mayan prophecies refer to a sudden and dramatic shift in the Earth's crust. In such a pole shift, the continents and the Earth's crust would slide over the planet's core, with catastrophic consequences.
Such an extremely rapid pole shift on the timescale of hours would be a catastrophe like we've never even thought of. A place like New York could get shifted towards the Arctic, end up completely covered in ice. And a place like Alaska might end up at the equator under the sun. Pole shift is actually not a new idea.
Great minds like Lord Kelvin, George Darwin, and Albert Einstein all considered the theory.
And in the 50s, it was picked up by a professor named Charles Hapgood, who really developed the idea that pole shift had actually occurred recently and rapidly.
Charles Hapgood envisioned a devastating event that would literally turn our world upside down.
The pole shift theory is a complete disaster. It encompasses everything that scares us and involves the entire planet. A pole shift will cause earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis. It will affect everyone on the planet equally.
Ominously, evidence of pole shift has been found in 800-million-year-old rock formations in a remote and inhospitable place.
In the high Arctic of Norway, in a place called Svalbard.
Locked inside samples of ancient rock, evidence of a dramatic upheaval, evidence of a huge pole shift.
What we found was shocking. Not expected at all, we found these very, very large shifts in the magnetics.
Instead of the expected gradual changes, the mineral evidence suggested abrupt magnetic shifts and massive changes in sea level and climate, all happening at the same time.
The pole was shifting. In other words, Svalbard seemed to be moving around very rapidly.
Laboratory analysis confirmed the significance of the find. Pole shift wasn't some apocalyptic theory, but a real event.
It was really extraordinary. We just sat there thinking, maybe we found real evidence for pole shifting, or a large magnitude pole shifting in the ancient past. Whoa. John, check this out.
The researchers soon found evidence of dramatic geological upheaval.
These beds look like transitional.
Yeah.
We've got our continuous reef here below us, the nice gray.
Right.
Then it starts to redden before it goes completely red on the top. So this is our target.
There was yet more compelling evidence of a dramatic pole shift.
And here is the abrupt transition. Everything to my right, all the older rock, are these pale gray limestones composed of stromatolites, which were bacteria that formed huge reefs in the ancient past, just like corals form reefs today. But then, suddenly that reef ends. There's this abrupt, sharp transition. Everything turns red, becomes completely oxidized iron like the rust on your car. And that's where we think the pole shift happened.
Again, samples were ground out of ancient rock. Like tiny time capsules, the minerals locked inside would confirm whether pole shift had struck here as well.
So we've got our core out now, and I've drawn this orientation mark here to represent the location of this core with respect to Earth's current magnetic field. So what we want to do is bring this back to the lab and figure out where the continent of Australia was at the time these rocks were formed, because it's likely different today.
Some of those who fear the Mayans may have been right, think the end may come from pole shift, a sudden and massive slippage of the Earth's crust. To test the theory, geologists gathered key rock samples from opposite ends of the Earth. The magnetic signatures locked inside these rocks would reveal if such a catastrophe had struck our planet in the past.
I'm loading up these little cylindrical samples here. If we find the data from the samples is consistent, we will have documented a massive pole shifting event in all of Earth history.
The magnetic orientation of the ancient rocks from the Australian outback was compared to that of the other samples gathered from Arctic Norway. A match would mean that a global pole shift had caused similar movement across the entire face of the planet.
Wow, look at that.
Intriguingly, the samples from Norway and Australia, half a world apart, showed identical movements of the continents.
At this time, there appears to be a large paleomagnetic rotation, or large motion of the continents.
This suggests a dramatic singular shift of the Earth's crust and the mantle beneath it, some 800 million years ago.
This is the first really strong evidence for massive pole shift that has ever occurred in Earth history.
If it happened in the past, could it happen again, fast enough to cause the kind of catastrophe predicted by the Mayans?
Ordinary volcanoes, such as Mount St. Helens, we know can be tremendously destructive all on their own. But ordinary volcanoes are a pale shadow of the phenomenon called supervolcanoes.
If one of these behemoths blows, you might wish for a tsunami to come and wash the fire away.